In December 2008, as the global financial system stood on the brink of collapse, a quiet confession inside a Manhattan apartment sent shockwaves through Wall Street.
All these years after notorious Bernie Madoff fleeced investors in the biggest scam in U.S. history,
Bernie Madoff, one of the most trusted and respected figures in modern finance,
If there's an innocent explanation.
There is no innocent explanation.
admitted that the business he had spent decades building was nothing more than an illusion.
caught.
Yeah, I mean, people would borrow to put money in to his fund, being able to get access. Remember how we'd keep it so exclusive.
The money was gone, the records were fake, and the losses would eventually be measured not in millions, but in tens of billions of dollars.
We saw, meaning my brother and myself, that there was an opportunity.
For years, investors believed Bernie Madoff represented safety. While markets rose and crashed, while bubbles formed and burst, Madoff's returns appeared calm, steady, and immune to chaos.
To bring automation into the over-the-counter marketplace.
He was not just another money manager, he was an institution. Charities, pension funds, banks, celebrities, and some of the world's wealthiest families trusted him with their fortunes. What no one realized, at least not officially, was that behind the walls of this trusted empire stood the largest Ponzi scheme in financial history.
Basically just a big Ponzi scheme.
A fraud so massive, so carefully hidden, that it survived regulators, audits, market crashes, and repeated warnings for decades. This is the story of how Bernie Madoff earned the world's trust, and how that trust was ultimately weaponized.
Of these new types of systems is to make it easier and more cost-effective for people to trade.
Early life and entry into Wall Street. Bernard Lawrence Madoff was born on April 29, 1938, in Queens, New York. Raised in a middle-class Jewish family, Madoff's early life offered no obvious signs that he would one day orchestrate a historic financial crime. He attended Hofstra University, where he studied political science before briefly enrolling in law school, though he never completed his legal education. In 1960, at just 22 years old, Madoff founded Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. The firm began modestly, funded by savings Madoff earned working as a lifeguard and sprinkler installer, along with financial support from his father-in-law. At the time, Wall Street was dominated by large, established brokerage houses. Competing against them required innovation, and Madoff understood that early. By the 1970s and 1980s, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities had become a major market maker, executing trades for some of the largest financial institutions in the United States. At one point, it was estimated that a significant percentage of all trades on the New York Stock Exchange passed through Madoff's systems. This legitimate success laid the foundation for Madoff's reputation. He was seen as brilliant, disciplined, and forward-thinking, a man who understood markets better than almost anyone else. The NASDAQ chairman. Madoff's credibility reached new heights in the early 1990s when he became chairman of the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. NASDAQ itself represented the future of trading, fast, electronic, and modern. To be placed at the top of such an institution was not just an honor, it was a stamp of unquestionable legitimacy. As chairman, Madoff worked alongside regulators, major banks, and government officials. He advised on market structure and regulatory policy. His voice carried weight in Washington and on Wall Street alike. This role played a critical part in what would come later. To many investors, the idea that a former NASDAQ chairman could be running a massive fraud seemed unthinkable. Madoff was not an outsider. He was part of the system, one of its architects. Trust, once earned at that level, becomes incredibly powerful. The exclusive investment club. Alongside his legitimate brokerage business, Madoff quietly operated an investment advisory operation. Unlike typical hedge funds that aggressively marketed to attract capital, Madoff did the opposite. His fund was invitation only. Potential investors were often told their money was not needed. Some were turned away entirely. Others were allowed in only through personal connections or referrals. This manufactured exclusivity created demand and reinforced the perception that Madoff's strategy was both rare and valuable. Clients were told he used a conservative options-based strategy known as split-strike conversion. According to Madoff, this method allowed him to generate steady, low-risk returns regardless of market conditions. Month after month, account statements showed consistent gains, often between 1 and 2%. There were no wild spikes, no dramatic losses, just smooth, reliable growth. For investors burned by volatile markets, this stability was irresistible. Bernie Madoff and the $65 billion scam. By the early 1990s, Bernie Madoff's reputation had reached near-mythical status on Wall Street. For those inside his exclusive investment circle, doubt simply did not exist. Madoff was not just another money manager. He was a former NASDAQ chairman, a respected market maker, and a man whose name opened doors at the highest levels of finance. Yet behind this carefully constructed image, the foundation of his investment advisory business was built on deception. At the heart of Madoff's pitch was a strategy he called split-strike conversion. According to Madoff, client funds were invested in a basket of blue-chip stocks that mirrored the S&P 100 index. He claimed these stocks were then hedged with options, selling call options to generate income while purchasing put options to protect against downside risk. On paper, the strategy appeared conservative, sophisticated, and perfectly suited for wealthy investors seeking steady, low-risk returns. In the late 1990s, Harry Markopolos, a financial analyst working for a rival firm, was asked to replicate Madoff's investment strategy. Markopolos and his team spent months attempting to model the returns Madoff claimed to achieve. What they discovered was alarming. Based on real market data, the strategy Madoff described could not possibly generate the returns he reported, especially not with such consistency. Markopolos concluded that there were only two possible explanations. Either Madoff had access to illegal insider information, or the entire operation was a Ponzi scheme. After further analysis, insider trading was ruled out. The volume and timing of trades Madoff claimed simply did not align with real market conditions. Markopolos became convinced that Madoff was running a massive fraud. Beginning in 1999, Markopolos submitted detailed reports to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. His filings were not vague accusations. They were mathematically grounded analyses outlining exactly why Madoff's returns were impossible. He included charts, statistical models, and step-by-step explanations. Over the next several years, Markopolos would submit multiple warnings, each more urgent than the last. Madoff skillfully manipulated regulators just as he did investors. He provided fake documents, doctored records, and carefully rehearsed explanations. His investment advisory business was deliberately kept separate from his legitimate market-making operation, which generated real revenue. This legitimate arm of his firm acted as a shield, giving the illusion of overall financial health and operational credibility. Another glaring failure involved Madoff's auditor. His investment advisory business was audited by a tiny, obscure accounting firm with only a handful of employees, an arrangement completely inconsistent with the scale of assets Madoff claimed to manage. This alone should have raised immediate alarms. Instead, it was largely ignored. As the years passed, the scheme grew exponentially. Pension funds, universities, charities, and international banks invested billions. Some feeder funds, investment firms that pooled client money and invested it with Madoff, added another layer of distance between investors and the truth. These intermediaries conducted little independent verification, relying instead on Madoff's reputation and long track record. What ultimately kept it alive was confidence. As long as investors believed in Bernie Madoff, the system held together. But confidence is a delicate thing. When external pressure finally arrived, the illusion would collapse with breathtaking speed. That pressure came in 2008. The global financial crisis triggered panic across markets. Investors everywhere scrambled for liquidity. Hedge funds faced redemption requests. Banks tightened lending. For the first time in decades, Madoff faced a problem he could not solve with deception alone. Too many investors wanted their money back at once. Within weeks, withdrawal requests totaled billions. far more than the cash available in Madoff's accounts. The constant inflow of new money that had sustained the scheme for so long suddenly dried up. There were no new investors, no new funds, no escape. Behind the scenes, Bernie Madoff knew the end was inevitable. The system he had built over decades was unraveling, and there was nowhere left to hide. What happened next would expose the truth to the world and mark the beginning of one of the most shocking financial collapses in history. Bernie Madoff and the $65 billion scam. By late 2008, the global financial system was collapsing. Major banks were failing, markets were in free fall, and investor confidence vanished almost overnight. For Bernie Madoff, this chaos marked the beginning of the end. The Ponzi scheme he had secretly run for decades depended on one critical factor: a steady flow of new money. When the financial crisis froze liquidity and investors demanded withdrawals, that flow stopped. Without new funds coming in, the illusion collapsed. For the first time, Bernie Madoff was trapped by reality. On December 10, 2008, Madoff called his two sons, Mark and Andrew, to his Manhattan apartment. During that meeting, he made a shocking confession. He admitted that his investment advisory business was one big lie. There were no legitimate trades, no sophisticated strategies, and no consistent profits. The entire operation was a Ponzi scheme. The losses, he acknowledged, were massive, running into tens of billions of dollars. Stunned by the revelation, his sons faced an impossible decision. Within hours, they contacted their lawyer, who informed federal authorities. The following morning, December 11, 2008, Bernie Madoff was arrested by FBI agents. News of the arrest spread instantly across the world. The man once seen as one of Wall Street's most respected figures was now exposed as its most notorious fraudster. As investigators examined the damage, the scale of the fraud became clear. Thousands of victims across more than 40 countries were affected. Individual investors lost their life savings. Pension funds were devastated. Charities and non-profit organizations, many of which relied entirely on Madoff's returns, were forced to shut down. The emotional destruction was immense, leaving families and institutions financially and psychologically broken. The widely cited figure of $65 billion did not represent actual cash losses. Instead, it reflected the total value of fake account statements that included decades of imaginary profits. The real amount of invested money was far lower, but the devastation was just as real. What made the crime especially disturbing was its simplicity. There was no advanced technology or complex financial engineering, only lies, fabricated paperwork, and blind trust. In March 2009, Bernie Madoff appeared in federal court and pleaded guilty to 11 felony charges, including securities fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, perjury, and filing false documents with the SEC. There was no trial. Madoff did not attempt to defend himself. He admitted that the scheme began in the early 1990s and grew beyond his control, even as he continued deceiving investors year after year. The judge sentenced him to the maximum punishment allowed by law, 150 years in federal prison, along with an order to forfeit more than $170 billion. The sentence ensured that Madoff would never walk free again. He was sent to a federal prison in North Carolina, where he lived out his remaining years as inmate 61727-054. Stripped of wealth, influence, and status, Madoff became largely isolated. The man who once commanded admiration and authority was reduced to a warning, a symbol of unchecked deception. The consequences extended far beyond Madoff himself. His wife, Ruth Madoff, surrendered most of her assets and withdrew from public life, left with only a modest settlement. The family suffered devastating losses in the years that followed. One son died by suicide, the other from cancer, tragedies many associate with the overwhelming shame and pressure caused by the scandal. The Madoff case also exposed serious failures within regulatory institutions. Multiple investigations revealed that the SEC had ignored repeated warnings and missed clear red flags. Weak oversight and systemic incompetence allowed the fraud to continue for years. Bernie Madoff died in prison in April 2021 at the age of 82. His death ended his personal story, but the legacy of his crime remains. The $65 billion scam was not just financial, it was a collapse of trust. In the end, Bernie Madoff did not exploit the market. He exploited belief itself, and that lesson still echoes today.